Welcome to the latest episode of the HRLocker podcast. Today we have Deanna O Connor, founder of the Speak Up Club. Deanna is a former magazine editor, broadcaster, and event MC. She founded the Speak Up Club as a social enterprise to empower women as leaders in business. Deanna is also a freelance editor and content creator, writing about business, entrepreneurship, and startups. Deanna is here to talk to us about the changing world of work, how communication is more important than ever, and with the recent shift to remote work, how we can better present ourselves and our viewpoints in an ever-increasing online world.
So welcome to the show, Deanna. We're absolutely delighted to have you with us today. So first of all, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So most of my life I was working in magazines. I was that girl that had the Devil Wears Prada job where they say a million girls would kill for this job. And I worked my way up to being editor of magazines in the women's magazine industry. And it's a very small industry in Ireland and getting smaller all the time. Publishing is on its knees, I suppose, at the moment, fighting digital. So once you get to the point where you're a magazine editor, there's not many other places to go on the ladder. And I'm a big believer in forward motion. I have this dumb postcard stuck to my desk always with a picture of Yoda and a quote that says, "Always in motion is the future." My motto, I think. I like move on to the next thing, learn what you can, and when you've learned it, what's the next challenge? I don't think I could ever have been one of those people that stayed in one job all their lives. I'm definitely a slash kind of job person, a slash this, slash that, slash whatever. So after working in women's magazines, I really pivoted. I went, I suppose, full circle, you might say, back to my roots because I have a degree in international business. So I was very lucky to go and work as group head of content at Business and Finance Media Group at a really interesting time. It opened up more opportunities in digital for me with a focus on the website. I was given a lot of leeway to hire staff to work on video content and to bring that along. We were actually publishing a book at the time, which I got to head up that project on the history of Irish business. And they were starting Dublin Tech Summit, which was really exciting to be part of.
Cool. Yeah.
So that was really brilliant. But just prior to joining them, I had been diagnosed with a long-term illness, actually. And I suppose that was part of this change process starting. And I was kind of just getting used to it myself in the couple of years that I was at Business and Finance, seeing how I was, seeing how medication was working out. And I have to say, Ian Hyland, my boss there, was so supportive, so empathetic, and gave me so much leeway and trust to come in when I needed to come in, and just believed in me that the job would get done, and I didn't necessarily have to be present on my desk at 9 a.m. for it to get done. And if I need to be at my desk at 11:30 at night or 1 o'clock in the morning, that's what magazine editors do when you have a print deadline. So he didn't push me on be there 9 to 5. He was, you know what you need to do and you'll do it. So do it. So that led on to a couple of years later, me deciding what I needed to do was quit my job and move to Dingle.
Okay, big step.
And I think it was just one of those things where I'm a big believer as well. My other motto for life is leap and the net will appear. I think it's actually Eckhart Tolle's motto, but I'm stealing it. So I decided I was gonna make the change, and I texted a few friends down here to put feelers out about accommodation, because I'll say one thing, it's a very in-demand spot here. It's a big tourist destination, so accommodation can be tricky. And literally the next day, one of them rang me and said, "I've got a place. If you're interested, come down and look at it." And I just felt that was a sign. So I came down, I looked at the house, I came back, I handed in my notice. But very luckily, I suppose I half handed in my notice, let's say. I said, "Can I take the magazine and go and do it remotely? I want to work out of this place called Dingle Hub. It was sponsored by Air. It's amazing fibre broadband. Why can't I just take this part of the job, and I had someone else kind of lined up to take on the website and the rest of the job." So Ian, my boss, was really into this idea, and this is a few years before COVID hit, and everyone's boss is into the idea of remote working now because they've been forced to be. But at the time, I just had this crazy idea about taking my job and going and doing it at the other side of the country. And luckily, he was really on board with it and really supportive and thought it was a great idea. So that's what I did.
Wow. And I suppose, like, obviously at the moment we're very used to remote working. It's kind of become this normal thing that people are doing. But when you did it, it must have been a huge leap of faith for your boss to say, absolutely, go and do it. I'll trust you to get the job done. That must have been massive. So do you think then, so at the moment we are in this remote working bubble, people have either been forced into it, maybe now they're liking it, maybe they're hating it, but this is where we are for the moment. From your own experience after the last few years, what do you think have been the biggest benefits, but also maybe some of the drawbacks as well for your own experience of remote working?
So I guess for me, it was a huge lifestyle choice. I needed to change for my health. I suppose mainly that was the push. And I think that I suppose I'm a little bit of a hybrid of a remote worker. I was a hybrid at first of a remote worker and a freelancer. So now I'm more of a freelancer. I'm a little bit different. I think when you're remote working, you still need to be kind of at the office in office hours, essentially. But for me, a lot of it was having more free time in the daytime, that I could arrange my time how I wanted, so that I could get out in fresh air, go for walks, soak up some daylight hours for the good of my health. So, for people that are working with a global team that might actually have the opportunity to work slightly different hours, that could really work for them. If they're, for instance, working a later shift so that they're working with the States, they can have their mornings free, they can get out for their swim or their beach walk or something like that. But I think one thing I've definitely noticed, and this has been both as a freelancer and I suppose not so much as a remote worker. When I started as a remote worker, I was working with a team that I already knew, that I had already worked with in real life in the same room. So, you know everyone's quirks, what annoys them, where they hide files on the server.
When you have all the legwork done already. Exactly.
I think people are finding really hard right now is with new hires or moving into a new team and working with people that you haven't had that same room, real life experience with, is that onboarding or getting used to different people's ways of working when you're either a remote worker in a new team or a freelancer, is that you just don't know these tiny little things that you only know by kind of real life work with them, or it's just that bit harder to smooth out when you're doing it remotely. So it can cause a bit of confusion. Like I said, if you don't know where they hide that file on the server, or you're not quite sure who's responsible for getting back to a client on something, and there's just that bit of back and forth of, do I do this? Do you do that? Should I don't want to go back to the client before you do, that kind of stuff. So it's all these little things that makes communication so important in teams, because you don't want to look bad in front of clients. You want to make sure you have this joined up approach. You want to make sure you all know what everyone else is doing, because otherwise it makes it seem like everyone in the company has no idea what anyone is doing, and that's bad. So there is a lot of stuff like that really needs to, use post project debriefs, use a kind of a pre-project meeting to get everyone on the same page. All of that stuff really improves workflows, improves communication, and ultimately improves the way you're presenting your company to the world, because I'm often working for companies that I am contract working for. I'm not working for them, but maybe everyone else on the team works together, and I have to, wedge myself into that and make it seem seamless to the client or anyone I'm contacting on their behalf. So I just think that communication and getting on the same page as a team is vitally important.
Yeah, especially because I suppose you're totally right, is for people you've worked with and you've had that experience with, how to navigate around, what's done, that somebody takes their coffee break at 11 and don't contact them between 11 and 5 past 11, or it's harder when you're coming onto the team as a remote worker. Certainly, I definitely would agree that's where you're, to use a very cliched word, that's where the communication has got to be key of how you set that up for new workers, So definitely, if we look at, I would definitely say when you meet with somebody, establishing that kind of face-to-face communication is easier because obviously you're beside them, you can see their body language, you can see what way they're reacting to a question you've asked, or but I do find even myself that a lot of that is lost when you're online. If you can't, it's difficult to read certain cues, especially if you're in a meeting with 5 or 6 different people online, and sometimes the conversation isn't flowing because people you can't really hear over each other, or maybe there's a bit lost in somebody's mic isn't really working properly. So for people, do you have any advice, or what's going to work for you in regards to when you're online with somebody and you're in a meeting? How do you make sure that you get your voice heard?
I think this can be so difficult, and I think it's something a lot of people struggle with. And even before we all went crazy using Zoom, like we have, people were using conference calls a lot before, and that was even more difficult because you're missing all the visual cues there that you would have in a face-to-face setting. And when I was thinking about this and what I can tell people about it, I always go back to thinking about work I've done in radio. And in particular, there was one time I was guest presenting on a show with a male co-host, and there was a caller guest who was quite a character, and the skill of interrupting politely and firmly is such a good skill. And I think I would always say to people, if you want to learn how to do that, first of all, and I think it's a really important one for especially group conference calls, is learn from the best. So turn on your radio, pick out your favorite current affairs program, or, you know, Talk to Joe at lunchtime, where there are people who are on a rant about stuff or have an agenda and are really trying to get their point across, and listen to how that radio presenter interrupts them, or how they shut them down when they're running out of time and they need to wind it up, because you'll really learn so much from actively listening to that and how they do it. And that's a great tip, just to really listen to someone who's doing it really well, because that's a wonderful way to learn how to do that. And that's a skill that will really stand to you when you're trying to get someone to shut up on a Zoom call. So another thing I think that Zoom is a challenge that it throws up is actually being visible. And a lot of people have worked on this now and have got better at it. But at the start, I think a real problem was not being visible, because if you've got a gallery view and there's 8 or 12 people on it, and you are sitting with your back to a window and you're in silhouette and your laptop is down on your desk and your head is 2 feet over it and you're looking down your nose at the people can't see you properly. So it's those really simple things that I think probably most people know by now, but, you know, put your laptop up in a pile of books, sit face natural light, or put a light behind it so there's light on your face so people can see you. Because if people can't see you, you're literally not visible, you know. So that's just simple things. And I suppose the angle of the laptop thing is something that I would think, it's funny because it's different now with Zoom, that we can't read those cues the same way. But in public speaking training, when I'm coaching people, I always tell people this thing about keeping a level head. So there's a wonderful book which I'd highly recommend called The Credibility Code, and it's by a trainer called Cara Alter. I love her work, and she talks a lot about how if you want people to think you're level-headed, you literally visually have to have your head level. And there's so much language around how people perceive us that is rooted in physicality. So, you know, if you're on a Zoom call and you're looking down your nose, people might think you're being condescending looking down at them. I think we're all kind of aware at this point, it's just that you don't know how to angle your laptop. But if you were in real life, if you were giving a speech and you had your head tilted upwards, you would come across as condescending. And then the opposite is, if you've got your chin tilted down, you come across as kind of submissive. And I always give that classic example of Princess Diana when she did that famous TV interview and her chin was down and her big blue eyes were looking up. The whole world felt really sorry for her because it's very submissive posture. So, you know, all of these ways that we perceive people is really rooted in how they're physically standing, what characteristics they have. So, there's, you know, I could list off so many words, but just a few. Even, you know, we call people crooked or shifty. So if you're standing slumped or you're kind of pacing around, then you're crooked or shifty, and that's how you maybe come across. But then if you say someone has a really strong backbone, that's so positive, and that comes from them standing up straight and having a level head. And, you know, so all of these things, these signals that you can give out unwittingly, can give out very negative signals without realizing. So I do think, you know, I don't want to sound like your mom telling you to stand up straight, but
I'm sitting up straight, I promise.
Yeah. So one last little tip on that, I think, is another one to remember. And I suppose this one I would take, my kind of TV experience would have been the key to this, and also radio a little bit as well. But, you know, on camera, I was always kind of told to give it an extra 10 to 20%. You know, if you are only as animated as you are in normal life, it can come across so flat. It can come across very boring. And, you know, I'm talking to you here now, and I'm suppose I'm a bit conscious I don't have a proper podcast microphone, so I'm trying to project my voice a bit more than I maybe normally would if you were in the room here. You know, you don't have to be giving it showbiz jazz hands, but you know, if you can stand up, that's much better. And I was hoping to do this from a standing desk today, even, but the room booking didn't work out. But you project your voice better, you've more energy. You know, people do standing meetings all the time now as well, and that's so that there is a bit more energy and people aren't getting into that kind of slump. So if you can take your Zoom calls at a standing desk so that you're more energetic and you have more voice projection, you're making more of an impact. But also bring that little extra bit of energy, because it's not the same as being in a room with someone. You are essentially on television to the rest of the people in that meeting, if you think about it that way. So you kind of have to bring your inner children's television presenter out and be a little bit more, hey, everybody. You know? Professional. Definitely up the extra 10 to 20%. Keep everyone awake.
No, but I think you're right. I think we have to, even though we have told everybody, look, it's the same. We're going to get the same thing done. We're online. It's okay. It's business as usual. The truth is, it is different. Yeah. And that's, you know, it is different. And so we do, if you still want to be heard in the meeting, you do need to elevate your voice and I know myself that I've been in meetings where there's 5 or 6 people on it, and maybe 2 people don't have their camera turned on, and those people aren't really involved in the conversation because you can't see them. And I suppose I do struggle with this myself personally, is that, you know, I can go into a meeting and I know that I need to project and get my point across. But I do struggle to get that personal connection with somebody, because usually, you know, you could maybe have that side conversation with somebody, or you're making different kind of eye contact, and it is difficult to create that one-on-one connection when you're online.
Definitely. And I mean, that's why it's so important to do, you know, what we did before we started the podcast today. We had a little chat about where I'm going on my holidays and your kids and personal things. And it's important more now than ever to do that, because otherwise, you know, it's really hard to feel that connection. And you know, as well, people are suffering from Zoom exhaustion. And I feel like a lot of people are getting booked all day back to back with Zoom calls, which is the worst possible thing ever, because they're not getting the chance they would in normal meeting scenario to get up, go back to their desk, get a cup of coffee, go to the toilet, go to the meeting in someone else's office or in a boardroom, or walk around even. So it's really bad for their back, it's really bad for their health, it's really bad for their mental health to be sitting on back-to-back meetings all day. And people I know they are, they've told me, I just think they need to block out time in their diary, 15 minutes.
I think I'm a victim to that as well.
Also, I asked someone actually why they were calling me on a Webex call and not just on a phone, which would be so much easier. And they said, because if we're on a phone call, they can't track what we're doing.
Oh, okay.
So we have to use these Teams and Webex and things like that, so that our bosses know that we're at work and not, you know, on the phone to my mom chatting. So I think that's exhausting. And and the Zoom exhaustion, I know Zoom is getting the blame for everything, but it's like the generic term we're using. So, you know, the mental processing that you need to try and read all these subtle signals, because your brain is in overdrive trying to look at the 12 people in gallery view and read everything you possibly can try and read off them. You don't even know you're doing it, but your poor brain is working on complete turbo, trying to figure out, can I get any visual cues from this person? I can only see a very edited bit of their body. So you're not seeing, for instance, the feet, which, you know, in a real life setting are very telling, because people always put a lot of energy into composing their facial features. And we might think about our arms because we might be conscious about how we gesture, or, you know, you might be a little bit conscious about if you fold your arms, or you might know some of that body language stuff. But we always forget about our feet and our legs, and they leak a lot of information. And if you remember the last time, whenever it was that you were standing around at a party or in a pub, you know, you can look at someone's feet and you can see who they want to talk to, or you can see if they want to go because their feet's pointing behind, you know, towards the door. Yeah. So we're only getting a tiny fraction online. So it's so hard to read the cues, and so hard to connect, and you just can't. It doesn't replicate the real life experience. So, and like I said, that you can't trust the same signals hold true either, because if someone's looking down their nose at you, it's because they've got their camera at the wrong angle, not because they're being condescending. So there's, it's up to us to present ourselves the best we can. And I think another thing, and I'm very conscious of this as well, is, that connection thing, is that a lot of us don't look at the camera when we're talking. And I actually, because I've been giving webinars, I have got stickers stuck beside my camera on my laptop with eyes drawn on them. And I have "look here" written around it to remind me to look at the camera, because the camera laptop is so invisible, or the laptop camera is so invisible, you can't even see it. It's just a little green dot beside it. So I need that extra visual cue to even get me to look in the right direction. But if I'm not looking at the camera, then to you, I'm not looking at you. So if I'm looking straight at the camera, you're going to connect more with me, but I'm used to talking to you. So I'm going to look at your face on the screen, and then I'm not looking at you. So you're not connecting with me, but I feel like I'm connecting at you because I'm
looking at you. Exactly.
It's like being on, if you watch a TV show and you see, the Late Late Show or whatever, and the host is talking to the guest, but then sometimes they'll turn around and do a piece to camera where they look directly into a camera and they tell you all about the competition line that you've got to ring in or whatever. And that's what we all need to be doing. We need to be doing pieces to camera, but we're not professional TV presenters. And if we were, we'd be making way more money and every Friday night. But we're not. And all of a sudden, we're all being asked to do our jobs, but also have this whole other skill set that a TV show host does and gets paid big bucks for, on top of all our normal jobs. So that's stressful for people, because most people do not want to be, or have not got it in them to be a TV host. And all of a sudden, that's part of our job now.
No, it is true, because even if you're looking at a screen, and usually I'm going to call it, maybe I have four faces on it, and I see my own face, I'm moving to each person on the screen, even though that's actually not where they are. They don't think I'm looking at them. They think I'm looking off some other corner of my screen.
Exactly. So that's so hard. It's so hard to just visually train yourself. And then also for people who aren't comfortable with that, who are maybe naturally shy or don't like being on camera, which is a lot of us, it's a stress. It's this low level anxiety that's eating into every part of your working day. And I mean, there's enough anxiety around, COVID, work, life, everything. Who needs another one?
But I do think, and I hope that some people have changed this in themselves. I work with a lovely lady, Jenny, it's like, you can't be on 5 hours of Zoom calls a day, because sometimes at the beginning of COVID, when I was working from home full time, it's like I'd have just back to back of Zoom calls, and exactly like I said, it's exhausting. You don't have time to go to the bathroom. I'm sitting in the one spot for 5 hours and not moving. And exactly like I said, if I was in the office, I would have got up and walked to the other meeting, walked outside. It's not normal to be back to back. So the Zoom fatigue, I think, is definitely something that people have to train themselves out of, that you should block bits off in your calendar and things like that. She actually,
Sorry for interrupting you there. No. There is this expectation that people are available literally every hour they're at work. But that doesn't happen in an office setting. You get up from your desk, you chat to people, you're standing by the water cooler, you go make a coffee. Whereas the trust needs to be there for working from home. You need that trust from your boss, that you don't feel anxiety all day that they don't believe you're working every second. Yeah. And you can't work every second. You don't do that in an office anyway. And you shouldn't be expected to at home, and you shouldn't be expected to work back-to-back Zoom calls without a break. And I feel very strongly about that people have to trust their employees, and that's so important.
Yeah, and I'm a huge, just a hobby horse of mine at the moment is that I, especially here with us, I don't want somebody just clocking in from 9 to 5:30, and I'm, it's actually what they're outputting. That's the actual measure. And I love that you said with the magazine that they were happy that the magazine got done, which that's the key, is that if you're able to get your job done, then that's, you've reached your goal. And whether that was that, you maybe took a break between 11 and 12 to go for a walk, that's okay, because you're still able to do your job, and that's the key. Everybody is talking about the future of work and what that's going to look like. And personally, so we've done a couple of bits here, and I've spoken to a lot of people on previous podcasts that, well, the future of work probably look something like a dual working model, some bits of part-time, some bits of home working, some bits in the office. I think it'll be a combination of people. And especially, I think for some people, they love remote working. They're enjoying it. Other people may want to have a bit more social aspect and go into the office, and neither is right or wrong. It's up to the individual. But in terms of, we've all these tools. I mean, I have, between Zoom and Teams and Skype and everything else. What do you think is the main, if you were to give somebody, well, in terms of the next 6 months, in terms of communication, do you have any kind of tips or resources that people could use to help them better with their communication? Because undoubtedly it's going to be online for the next 12 months.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for the next 12 months, I think we're going to be using kind of what we have until at such point as we all have microchips implanted in our brains, and then I can just download my thoughts and send them directly to your microchip, and you understand without me even speaking, and then I can just stay in my hermetically sealed oxygen chamber and not interact with anyone. So that's really handy, but it'll be really boring time. Really boring life. So, I love technology. I love productivity. I love all of these things that make more efficient uses of time, that streamline workflows. So, and you know what I love? Slack, for instance, when that was invented, I thought that was life-changing. I thought it really improved transparency between teams, without getting CC'd on 3 million emails every day. You put something in a channel and it's there, and everyone who's working on that project can refer back to it. And it's so handy because you put it in Slack once, you don't get 17 emails about it. So I thought that was something I was using obviously way before COVID, and continue to love. I also think any kind of, I know there's various different versions of these, but things like Trello and Kanbanize, which are virtual Kanban boards for moving projects along and for seeing what everyone who's working on the project is doing, and seeing what tasks people have been assigned and what they've done on them, is great. And I think that can help a lot with those kind of micromanager employers, where it's good for them to just be able to look at something and see where you are on a project, as opposed to call you up and ask you, and then you feel micromanaged. So I think those kind of things can be really useful in terms of building that trust between employers and employees, which, once the job gets done, once the KPIs are reached, that's what's important. It's not whether they took a 15-minute break or a 20-minute break on a Tuesday, But I think it's really important to, pick and choose the best of all this technology, because it gives us, if you can get as much technology and AI and everything like that to do the drudge work, it gives humans more capacity to do the creative work, to do the interesting work, to do the communicating work. So I think anything we can do to kind of improve ourselves, work on our presentation skills, engage with other people, it'll pay off in the end. And even if you don't like Zoom, you don't like Teams, you don't feel comfortable using these tools that we're using now, I'd say work on it, because anything you do now that will help you with those and how you engage with people, it'll help your personal presence, it'll help your impact. And 12 months from now, if we're back in the real world, if you're in a meeting situation, if you're in a boardroom, if you're giving a presentation, if you're speaking at a conference, the work you do now on how you communicate using Zoom is going to stand to you then.
In the 4 or 5 months ago, we were talking about quick things that we were doing to get over this period. What things can we do to get over the next 3 or 4 months? Whereas I think the likes of Teams or Zoom or Slack, they're not going to go away in 12 months. They're here to stay. This is how we're going to communicate,
Yeah, they are here until the next thing supersedes them. They're here till our artificial avatars that are holograms like can be beamed into another office or something like that. Like when something bigger and better and snazzier comes along, they'll go away. Until the virtual reality versions of ourselves can be hologrammed into a room together, then they're here.
But until then, this is, I think the need for people having to go to a meeting in Dublin, or, having to actually travel to meetings. That I think that well, I hope, well, certainly for me, and I can only talk for myself, is that I think we've realized that, we don't actually have to travel 3 hours to a meeting when we could actually just meet with the person online,
Has the phrase that meeting could have been an email.
Exactly.
The other thing on that is that in terms of the amount of miles people are clocking up and burning unsustainable fuels in their cars, going to meetings around the country, or air miles, international teams have been prohibited from traveling at the moment. Americans can't fly in here. There are so many FDI companies in Ireland, and they're still operating. And
Exactly.
the world hasn't ended. I mean, it's up in flames, but it hasn't ended. And those executives aren't flying in for their weekly meeting. And okay, it's not the easiest, and they are having to find ways to work around it, and it's not ideal not to have that face-to-face contact. But life is going on, and their businesses are still functioning. And I hope a lot of them are realizing now that so much executive travel maybe doesn't need to be done, and maybe there are ways that are less harmful to the planet that people can continue to do business in.
But I was talking to somebody recently, and he said that as part of a contract he has with China, it was told him he has to be in China once a month. It was a minimum requirement, had to be over there. He'd been over there actually 18 times already. And he said COVID hit and the job is still going. He doesn't actually have to go. It was just something that had been written to a contract 10 years ago.
I do understand that, especially when you're doing business internationally, culturally, things can be so different. People don't understand each other, and meeting face to face is so important in building trust. And I mean, Martin Shanahan, CEO of the IDA, talks about this and how they're doing virtual visits for potential investors at the moment. Luckily for them that they already had this technology built and in place before COVID hit. It was something they were already doing, but luckily that they can use it now to keep showing off Ireland to potential investors here. But at the same time, those investors still want to come here. They still want to, I mean, maybe not shake hands now, but elbow bump or whatever. Because people do business with people, essentially.
Yeah, no, I think so as well. So, Deanna, it was lovely to have you with us today. If people would like to get in contact with you, what is the best way for them to?
You can find information about me on the Speak Up Club website. It's probably the easiest thing to find because my name is unusual to spell. So speakupclub.ie. And I will have some links up of YouTube videos of some of the webinars I've been giving throughout lockdown for various people. I've been doing webinars for SkillNet and for Iconic Offices. You'll find everything on there on the website, speakupclub.ie, and you'll find all the links to the social media channels as well there.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. And again, all Deanna's information will be at the bottom of the podcast as well, and speakupclub.ie. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for listening. Check us out at HRLocker.com. The show was hosted by Christelle Rinn and produced by Jenny Martin. Subscribe to catch the latest episodes on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you like to get your podcasts. If you'd like to feature, get in touch by emailing us at marketing@HRLocker.com. You can also follow HRLocker on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn.